Have you ever stood in a crowded room full of people and felt utterly, profoundly alone? Not lonely, just separate. As if you're watching life through glass, unable to fully connect, unable to explain why everyone else seems to fit together while you remain apart. Carl Jung spent decades studying people like you, people he called chosen souls, not chosen by fate or destiny, but called by something deeper, called to a journey that most people never take. And this journey, Jung discovered, always leads to walking alone. I'm about to share 5 truths Jung uncovered about why certain souls walk a solitary path. And if you've been blaming yourself for your loneliness, if you've been wondering what's wrong with you, you may finally understand that you're not broken. You're just walking a different road. And that road, by its very nature, is walked alone. Let me show you why. The first truth about why chosen souls walk alone might surprise you, because it's not about what you're missing. It's about what you finally let go of. Most people don't actually see each other when they connect. They see their own disowned qualities reflected back. A man projects his inner feminine onto a woman, then falls in love with his own projection. A woman projects her inner masculine onto a man, then connects with what she's projected. Jung called this anima and animus projection, the unconscious mechanism through which people seek their missing psychological halves in others. This isn't conscious, it's not malicious. It's just how unconscious relating works. People project their missing pieces onto others, then feel magnetically drawn to those projections. They call it chemistry. They call it connection. They call it clicking with someone. But it's not actually seeing the other person. It's seeing yourself reflected back. Through your inner work, you integrated internally what most people project externally. You brought your shadow into consciousness. You reclaimed your anima or animus. You became whole within yourself. Jung referred to this as the conjunctio, the inner marriage of opposites that creates psychological wholeness. And that integration changed everything. Think of most people as holding up mirrors to each other. Each person holds a mirror, reflecting the other's disowned qualities back to them. Neither is seeing the actual person. They're seeing their own reflection in the other's mirror. But they call this mirroring connection, chemistry, even love. When you walk into a room now, you're no longer holding a mirror. You've integrated internally what you used to project. So, when others look at you expecting to see their reflection, they see you. Just you. A whole person, not a projection screen. And when you look at them, you see them as they actually are. Not as containers for your disowned qualities. Not as missing pieces to complete you. Just as whole, complex human beings with their own psychology. This clarity is beautiful, but it eliminates what most people experience as connection. There's no magnetic pull, no overwhelming chemistry, no feeling that this person completes something in you, because nothing needs completing. You're already whole. Most people experience this as no spark. They're used to the intensity of projection, that desperate magnetic pull towards someone who seems to complete them. Without that desperation, connection feels flat, calm, uncharged. But you're not experiencing absence of connection. You're experiencing absence of projection. And most human bonding is built entirely on projection. Does this mean you can't connect? Number. It means you can't connect the way unconscious people connect. Through desperate need, through projection, through seeking completion in another. You're capable of something deeper, conscious connection between two whole beings. But those connections are rare, because most people are still playing the projection game. And you can't play anymore, not because you're above it, but because you've integrated past it. This is the first reason you walk alone. You've stopped projecting what others still need to project. And without projection, most of what people call connection simply doesn't happen. But stopping projection is only the beginning. This second truth reveals something far more painful about why even when you try to belong, groups eventually push you away. Every group, family, friends, community, operates on unconscious agreements, unspoken rules about what's okay to see and what must remain hidden. Jung referred to this as the collective shadow, the shared unconscious material that groups refuse to acknowledge. These agreements create belonging, cohesion, comfort. Everyone participates in the same shared unconsciousness, and that creates safety. But you've become conscious of things most people keep unconscious. You've seen through family dynamics. You've recognized relationship patterns. You've understood how systems perpetuate themselves. And here's what happens. Even when you're silent, even when you're trying to fit in, your consciousness itself creates disruption. The group senses that someone isn't playing along with the unconscious agreements. Someone's seeing what everyone agreed not to see. Someone's awake while everyone else is maintaining the collective dream. Jung called this the differentiation from the collective, and it's perceived as a threat by those still merged with group consciousness. One woman Jung worked with experienced this painfully. After years of deep psychological work, she'd try to join communities, spiritual groups, friend circles, social organizations. Initially, people were drawn to her depth, her authenticity, her grounded presence. But within weeks, the same pattern would emerge: subtle exclusion, fewer invitations, a sense that she didn't quite fit, eventually clear rejection. She couldn't understand it. She wasn't being critical. She wasn't judging anyone. She was simply being herself, conscious, integrated, whole. Through analysis, Jung helped her see your consciousness threatens their unconsciousness, not intentionally, not from superiority, but your very presence, your refusal to participate in collective blindness, destabilizes their system. Jung described this phenomenon as the scapegoating of consciousness. When groups unconsciously expel the member who threatens their shared illusions, groups always reject the conscious threat, not from malice, but from self-protection. She asked if she should try harder to fit in. Jung said, "You cannot return to unconscious participation. You've individuated beyond that. These groups are simply revealing their incompatibility with consciousness." The pattern continued throughout her life. Groups would embrace her initially, then gradually push her out, not because she was difficult, but because consciousness, when it's genuine, is inherently disruptive to unconscious systems. This is the second reason you walk alone. Your consciousness threatens groups operating on shared blindness, not because you're trying to threaten them, but because awakeness in a sleeping world is always experienced as dangerous. Now, this third lesson changes everything, because it reveals why even simple, casual connection has become impossible for you now. Before your transformation, surface living felt natural. Small talk was fine. Casual friendships felt satisfying. Pleasant conversation about weather, work, and weekend plans felt like enough. You hadn't experienced the depths yet, so the surface was all you knew. But then you did the work. You confronted your shadow. You encountered the unconscious. Jung called this the descent into the underworld, the necessary journey into the depths of the psyche that transforms consciousness forever. You went deep into psychological territories most people never explore. You touched something real, something profound, something that changed you fundamentally. And now, the surface feels like suffocation. It's not that you judge it. It's not that you think you're better than surface interactions. It's that you literally cannot participate in them without feeling like you're betraying something essential in yourself. Surface conversation about nothing important feels hollow. Casual friendships that never go deeper feel empty. Relationships that stay at the level of pleasant pleasantries feel like slow death. Think of it like learning to breathe underwater. For years you lived at the surface, floating on top of the ocean, enjoying sunshine, comfortable in the shallows. That felt like the whole reality. The surface was enough because you didn't know anything else existed. But then you learned to dive. You went deep beneath the surface into a world of profound depth, strange beauty, overwhelming pressure, and life forms that exist only in the dark. You experienced a reality most surface dwellers never encounter. Now, when you return to the surface, you can't pretend the depths don't exist. You can't participate innocently in surface living when you know what's beneath. Other people are still happily floating on the surface, having surface conversations about surface things. And you're there too, physically, but psychologically, you're always aware of the depths beneath. You can't unfeel what you felt in the deep, can't unsee what you saw there, can't unknow what you learned. You try to join surface conversations, but you're always aware of the depths those conversations are avoiding. Someone complains about their day at work, and you see the existential crisis they're not addressing. Someone talks about their relationship drama, and you perceive the shadow projections they're not owning. You attempt casual friendships, but you're always feeling the potential for depth that's never being accessed. And you can't force yourself to be satisfied with the surface anymore, not from judgment, just from having experienced something deeper. Once you've breathed underwater, floating on the surface feels like forgetting half of what's real. Jung described this as the burden of expanded consciousness. Once you've seen more, you can't unsee it. This is the third reason you walk alone. You've been to depths most people never touch, and you can't pretend those depths don't exist. You can't return to innocent surface living. Most people are still at the surface, and happily so. But you can't join them there anymore. If you're recognizing yourself in these truths, if you've stopped projecting, if your consciousness unsettles groups, if surface living feels impossible, please hear this. You're not broken. You're not failing at connection. You're experiencing the natural isolation that comes with genuine transformation. Jung never sugarcoated this. He never promised that doing the work would make you more popular, more connected, more integrated into society. He promised it would make you more real, more authentic, more yourself. And being yourself, when you've done deep work, includes walking a path that most people aren't walking. That path is often walked alone. Before we explore the final 2 reasons, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue. Here's where it gets truly isolating, because this 4th truth exposes why, even when you find depth-oriented people, genuine understanding remains elusive. This isn't about intelligence. It's not about being more educated or more spiritual. It's about experiential depth. You've confronted your shadow in ways most people avoid. You've sat consciously with your darkness. Jung called this the integration of the shadow, the courageous act of acknowledging and accepting the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. You've integrated aspects of yourself that others repress or project. You've experienced psychological death and rebirth. This creates a level of consciousness, a capacity for paradox, an acceptance of your full humanity, a way of holding complexity that most people simply haven't developed, not because they're incapable, but because they haven't taken the journey. And that experiential gap makes real communication nearly impossible. You reference experiences they haven't had. You speak from depths they haven't accessed. You hold paradoxes they can't tolerate. You're operating from a psychological platform they haven't built. Jung referred to this as the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing truths simultaneously, which most people haven't developed. One man Jung worked with captured this isolation perfectly. After years of deep individuation work, he'd achieved something rare, genuine psychological wholeness. He could hold darkness consciously without acting it out. He could sit with paradox without needing resolution. He could accept his full humanity, light and shadow, without judgment. He'd try to share his experience with others, even psychologically oriented people. But every conversation would hit a wall. When he'd describe consciously holding his shadow, people would hear repression. When he'd explain integrating opposites, people would hear compartmentalization. When he'd share accepting his darkness, people would hear justifying bad behavior. He wasn't being misunderstood because he communicated poorly. He was being misunderstood because he was speaking from a consciousness others hadn't accessed. He told Jung, "It's like I've learned a new language by living in a country most people never visit. I can speak their old language, but when I try to describe the new country, there are no words they understand, and they haven't been there, so they can't recognize what I'm pointing to." Jung confirmed this. You've accessed consciousness most people never develop, not because you're superior, because you've taken a journey they haven't taken. That journey has brought you to a psychological place where few people can meet you. Jung described this as the loneliness of individuation, the inevitable isolation that accompanies psychological wholeness. The consciousness you carry creates an experiential gap that makes genuine mutual understanding rare. The man asked if he'd ever find people who understood. Jung answered honestly, "Rarely. Most people won't do the work required to access the consciousness you've developed. You'll find appreciation, even admiration. But genuine mutual understanding at your depth? That's extremely rare. This is the loneliness of individuation. This is the fourth reason you walk alone. You carry consciousness others can't access. You've done work most people avoid. You speak from depths most people haven't touched. And that creates a gap that even well-meaning people can't bridge. And now, this final truth might be the most profound of all, because it reveals that your solitude isn't just circumstantial, it's existential. Here's what most people don't understand. The majority of human connection is driven by incompleteness. People seek relationships because they need others to complete them, validate them, reflect parts of themselves they can't own. This neediness, this fundamental sense of being incomplete alone, is the magnetic force that pushes people together. Jung called this the psychology of dependency, the unconscious drive to seek wholeness through union with another rather than through inner integration. It's what creates the desperate seeking, the anxious attachment, the feeling that I can't live without you. But you've done something different. Through your inner work, you've become internally complete, not perfect, whole. Jung referred to this state as the realization of the self, achieving psychological wholeness through integrating all aspects of your psyche. You contain your own masculine and feminine, your own strength and vulnerability, your own light and shadow. You don't need others to reflect parts of yourself you've disowned. You've reclaimed those parts. You don't need external validation. You've validated yourself internally. You don't need someone to complete you. You're already complete. And that completeness removes the drive toward connection, not because you don't value relationship, but because you don't need it the way incomplete people need it. The desperate seeking, the hungry grasping, the anxious clinging, all of that comes from incompleteness. When you're whole, that desperation dissolves. Think of most people as magnets split in half, positive on one side, negative on the other. They're powerful magnets, but divided. The positive pole desperately seeks the negative pole. The magnetic pull is overwhelming, constant, fundamental to their existence. When two split magnets find each other, positive connecting with negative, the attraction is intense, consuming, irresistible. They slam together and call it destiny, soulmate connection, meant to be. But it's not love. It's the magnetic force of two incomplete halves seeking wholeness through each other. You, through your inner work, have integrated both poles within yourself. You're still magnetic, still have presence, depth, attractive energy. But you're a complete magnet now. You contain both positive and negative poles internally, integrated and balanced. Now, when you meet split magnets desperately seeking their other half, there's no slam-together force. They're looking for someone to complete their incompleteness, but you have nothing incomplete to match with theirs. This feels like no chemistry to them, but it's not absence of connection. It's absence of desperate need, the difference between unconscious magnetic pull and conscious presence. Most people experience this and think something's wrong. Why don't I feel that desperate pull anymore? Why don't relationships feel as intense? But intensity isn't depth. Desperation isn't love. Needing someone isn't the same as choosing them. You're capable of something most people never experience, connection based on wholeness, not need. Two complete beings choosing each other, not because they need completion, but because they genuinely want to share their completeness. Jung called this conscious relationship, where two whole individuals meet as equals, rather than as incomplete halves seeking fusion. But those connections are rare, because most people are still seeking completion through others. And you're not offering completion anymore, you're offering presence. And most people don't yet understand the difference. This is the fifth reason you walk alone. You've transcended the desperate need that drives most connection. You're capable of chosen relationship, but not driven by incompleteness. And most connection is built on that incompleteness. If you've been recognizing yourself in these 5 truths, please understand. Your solitude isn't evidence of failure, it's evidence of completion. You walk alone because you've stopped projecting, making unconscious relating impossible. Your consciousness disrupts shared blindness, making group belonging impossible. You've touched depth, making surface living unbearable. You carry rare consciousness, making mutual understanding rare. You're internally whole, making desperate connection unnecessary. These aren't problems to fix. They're natural consequences of becoming whole. Jung called this the price of individuation, the inevitable solitude that accompanies psychological completeness. Individuation doesn't lead to more relationships. It leads to fewer relationships that are deeper, more real, more conscious. Jung never promised that doing the work would ease loneliness. He promised it would create authenticity. And for the individuated soul, authenticity includes solitude, not permanent isolation, but a kind of aloneness that comes from being whole in a world where most people are still seeking completion through others. If you're a chosen soul walking this solitary path, I want you to hear this clearly. Your solitude is not evidence that you're broken, unlovable, or have failed at connection. Your solitude is evidence that you've succeeded at individuation. You walk alone because you've stopped projecting, because your consciousness threatens comfortable unconsciousness, because you've touched depths most people avoid, because you carry consciousness most people haven't accessed, because you're whole in a world seeking completion through others. This isn't temporary loneliness while you wait for your people. This is the structural reality of being conscious in an unconscious world, whole in a fragmented world, integrated in a world operating through projection. But Jung also offered hope. There are others walking this path, other chosen souls who've also individuated, also become whole, also walk alone. When two whole beings meet, not from need but from recognition, connection becomes possible. Deep, conscious, real connection. Those meetings are rare. The solitude between them is real, but it's the solitude of authenticity, not the loneliness of incompleteness. You walk alone not because you're failing, but because you've become whole. And wholeness in an unconscious world is inevitably solitary, until it meets another wholeness. And then, for a moment, the solitude transforms into something sacred. If this explained your solitude, subscribe for Jungian psychology that honors the depth of your journey. Click the recommended video now for more insights into walking the path of individuation. And remember, chosen souls walk alone, not from failure, but from completion. Your solitude isn't your weakness, it's proof of your wholeness.